In a world saturated with noise, where the hum of notifications and the clamor of ambition drown out the whispers of the soul, there is a moment, a fleeting sacred pause that calls us back to ourselves. Picture a young woman, Elena, standing at the edge of a crowded city street. Horns blare, screens flash, and the weight of her day presses against her chest, a missed deadline, an argument with her sister, a gnawing sense that she's running in circles. Her phone buzzes, demanding attention, but she lets it fall silent in her pocket. For the first time in hours, she breathes deeply, closing her eyes. In that stillness, she feels a flicker of something ancient, something true. It's not an answer, but a question. What am I chasing? This is where we begin, not in the grandeur of cathedrals or the certainty of sermons, but in the raw, unpolished moments of human life where the teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Pope Francis meet us. Their words are not relics of a distant past, but lanterns for today's shadowed paths, guiding us through stress, disconnection, and conflict. They remind us that faith is not a destination, but a way of walking, a way of seeing. And so let us walk together through Elena's story and beyond to discover how humble service and bold faith can transform the ordinary into the eternal. Elena's life is not unlike yours or mine. At 32, she works as a graphic designer in a fast-paced agency where deadlines loom like storm clouds and creativity often feels like a commodity. Her apartment, a small studio cluttered with sketches and coffee mugs, is both sanctuary and cage. She loves her work, but the pressure to perform to be seen leaves her drained. Her relationships, too, bear the strain of modern life. Her sister Maria lives just an hour away, but their last conversation ended in sharp words over a misunderstanding about their aging mother's care. Elena feels the distance growing not just in miles, but in heart. And then there's the world beyond her door, news of division, unrest, and suffering that makes her feel small, helpless, powerless. Yet in that moment on the street when Elena chooses silence over noise, something shifts. She remembers a phrase from her childhood, something her grandmother used to say, quoting Jesus. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." The words from Matthew's Gospel feel like a hand reaching through the chaos. They are not a command, but an invitation, one that Pope Francis has echoed in his call for a revolution of tenderness. In his 2013 exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, Francis writes, "We are called to be close to others, to touch their lives with compassion, to walk with them in their struggles." For Elena, these words are a lifeline, a reminder that her weariness is not a failure, but a doorway to grace. But how does one find rest in a world that never stops? How does tenderness become a revolution in a life stretched thin? Let us linger here with Elena and explore the first teaching, the power of presence. Christ's invitation to come to me is not about escaping life's burdens, but about carrying them differently. It is about being fully present to God, to others, to oneself in a way that transforms the weight into purpose. Elena begins small. That evening, instead of scrolling through social media to numb her stress, she sits at her kitchen table with a candle and a notebook. She writes down what's heavy, the deadline, the fight with Maria, the fear that she's not enough. This act of naming her burdens feels vulnerable, almost foolish, but it's a start. She whispers a prayer, not for solutions, but for courage. This is the first practical step. Name what weighs you down. In the Gospel, Jesus does not promise to erase our struggles, but to share them. Pope Francis, in his 2020 encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, urges us to acknowledge our fragility as a path to solidarity with others. For Elena, writing her burdens is a way of saying, I am here, and I am not alone. The next day, Elena tries something new. At work, where conversations are often rushed and transactional, she pauses to really listen to a colleague, Sam, who's struggling with a project. Instead of offering quick advice, she asks, How are you holding up with all this? Sam's shoulders soften, and for a moment, the office feels less like a battlefield. This is the second step. Listen with your whole heart. Christ's ministry was marked by presence, sitting with the sick, dining with sinners, seeing the unseen. Pope Francis calls this the culture of encounter, a commitment to meet others where they are without agenda. Elena doesn't solve Sam's problems, but she gives him something rarer, her attention. These small acts, naming her burdens, listening to Sam, begin to change Elena's days. She notices moments of lightness, like sunlight breaking through clouds. But the real test comes with Maria. The silence between them has stretched into weeks, each waiting for the other to apologize. Elena feels the familiar tug of pride, the voice that says she should reach out first. Yet she remembers another teaching, this time from Christ's Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Pope Francis expands on this in Amoris Laetitia, writing, Love always takes the first step, even when it means risking rejection. Reconciliation, he says, is not about being right, but about being restored. Elena hesitates, then picks up her phone. She doesn't call too daunting, but she sends a text. I miss you. Can we talk? It's not perfect, but it's honest. Maria doesn't respond right away, and the waiting is agony. But Elena feels a quiet strength, a sense that she's chosen love over fear. This is the third step. Take the first step toward healing. It's not about grand gestures, but about humility, the willingness to say, I value you more than my pride. For Elena, this step is a leap of faith, one that echoes Christ's call to love without counting the cost. As days pass, Elena's small choices ripple outward. She starts carving out time each morning for silence, just 5 minutes to sit with her coffee and let her thoughts settle. She calls it her anchor time, a nod to Pope Francis's reminder that prayer is the breath of faith. In Gaudete et Exsultate, he writes, Holiness is not about perfection, but about returning again and again to the heart of what matters. For Elena, this heart is found in presence, in listening, in reaching out. Her stress doesn't vanish. Deadlines still loom, and Maria's response is still uncertain, but she feels less alone in it. She's beginning to see her life not as a series of tasks, but as a story of connection. Let's pause here with Elena and consider what her story reveals. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis are not abstract ideals, but practical tools for navigating a fractured world. They ask us to slow down, to see, to act with courage. They remind us that faith is not a feeling, but a choice made in the mess of daily life. Elena's journey is just beginning, but already it shows us what's possible. A life where stress becomes an invitation to rest, where disconnection becomes a call to encounter, where conflict becomes a path to peace. Now imagine Elena a week later standing in her mother's small living room. Maria is there too, and the air is thick with unspoken words. They've agreed to meet to discuss their mother's care, but the real conversation is about them sisters wounded but longing to mend. Elena feels the weight of the moment, the fear that one wrong word could unravel everything. But she remembers Christ's parable of the Good Samaritan, a story Pope Francis often returns to. In Fratelli Tutti, he writes, "The Samaritan did not just see the wounded man, he became his neighbor. To become a neighbor is to act, to risk, to love across divides." Elena takes a breath and speaks first. "I'm sorry," she says, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't mean to push you away." The words hang in the air, fragile but real. Maria's eyes soften and she nods. "I'm sorry, too. It's not a full resolution. There are still details to sort out, schedules to coordinate, but it's a start." They sit together planning their mother's care, and for the first time in months, they laugh a sound that feels like home. This is the fourth step: become a neighbor. It's about seeing the person in front of you not as an opponent, but as a companion on the journey. As Elena leaves her mother's house, she feels a quiet joy, not because everything is fixed, but because she's chosen to show up. She thinks of Christ's words in John's Gospel, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Pope Francis, in his 2015 homily on the family, calls this the joy of the gospel, a joy that comes from living for others. For Elena, this joy is not loud or triumphant, but steady, like a river carving its way through stone. Her life is still messy. Work is demanding, her mother's health is fragile, and her own doubts linger, but she's learning to carry it differently. This brings us to the fifth step, the one that ties it all together: live for others. Christ's life was a gift given freely, and Pope Francis reminds us that we are called to the same. In Laudato Si, he writes, "We are not meant to be isolated, but to live in communion with God, with each other, with creation." For Elena, this means small intentional acts: calling her mother daily, checking in with Sam at work, volunteering at a local food pantry on weekends. Each act is a thread weaving her life into something larger. As part one of our journey closes, let us hold Elena's story as a mirror. Her world, like ours, is loud, fractured, demanding. Yet through presence, listening, humility, and service, she's finding a way forward. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis are not distant stars, but lanterns in her hands lighting the path. They remind us that faith is not about perfection, but persistence not about escaping life, but embracing it with courage and love. And so we leave Elena for now, standing at the edge of her next choice. Her phone buzzes again, but this time she smiles, knowing she can choose when to answer. The noise of the world is still there, but so is the silence. The sacred pause where God whispers, "You are enough." This is the promise of humble service and bold faith, that in every struggle there is a chance to begin again, to live fully, to love deeply. Let us carry this promise forward into the next chapter of our story, where new challenges and graces await. Elena steps out of her mother's house into the crisp evening air, the laughter she shared with Maria still echoing in her heart. The streetlights cast soft pools of gold, and for a moment the city feels less like a labyrinth and more like a place where stories intertwine. Her reconciliation with Maria, though fragile, has kindled a spark of hope. Yet as she walks toward the subway, her phone vibrates with a work email. A client demands revisions by morning. The familiar weight of stress settles on her shoulders, and she wonders if this fleeting peace can withstand the demands of tomorrow. This is where we rejoin her in the tension between grace and grind, where the teachings of Christ and Pope Francis offer not just solace, but a way to live boldly in a world that often feels unforgiving. The subway ride is crowded, and Elena sways with the rhythm of the train, her mind replaying the email. She imagines the late night ahead, hunched over her laptop, chasing perfection for a client who might not notice the difference. She thinks of her mother, whose arthritis has worsened, and the food pantry where she's promised to volunteer tomorrow. The tasks pile up like stones, and she feels the urge to retreat, to let the world's demands swallow her small victories. But then she recalls a line from Pope Francis's Gaudete et Exsultat. Do not be afraid of holiness. It will take away none of your energy, vitality, or joy. Holiness, she realizes, is not about doing everything, but about doing what matters with love. This insight becomes Elena's anchor as she navigates the days ahead. The first challenge is her work, where the culture prizes speed and output over depth. She's talented, but the constant pressure to produce makes her feel like a machine, not a person. She thinks of Christ's words in Luke's Gospel. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Pope Francis echoes this in Laudato Si, critiquing a throwaway culture that reduces people to their utility. For Elena, this teaching is a call to reclaim her work as a form of service, not just a paycheck. She starts by reframing her approach. The next morning, as she tackles the client's revisions, she pauses to pray not for success, but for clarity. She asks, how can this work reflect care? Instead of rushing, she focuses on quality, adding subtle touches to the design that align with the client's vision. When she sends the final draft, she includes a brief note. I hope this captures what you're looking for. Let me know how I can refine it. The client responds with gratitude, and Elena feels a quiet satisfaction, not because she's won praise, but because she's offered something genuine. This is the sixth step work with intention. It's about seeing every task, no matter how mundane, as a chance to reflect God's creativity and care. But intention alone doesn't ease the workload. By midweek, Elena's calendar is a mosaic of deadlines, doctor's appointments for her mother, and her commitment to the food pantry. She feels stretched thin, and the temptation to cancel something, anything, grows. She thinks of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, wrestling with his own burden. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. Pope Francis, in a 2018 homily, calls this the prayer of surrender, a willingness to trust God's plan, even when it feels overwhelming. For Elena, surrender doesn't mean giving up, but letting go of the need to control everything. She decides to prioritize. She can't do it all, but she can do what's essential with love. She calls her mother to confirm the appointment, delegates a minor task at work to a colleague, and keeps her promise to the pantry. This is the seventh step: choose what matters. It's not about saying yes to everything, but about saying yes to what aligns with your purpose. Pope Francis writes in Christus Vivit, discernment is not about discovering what more we can get out of life, but about recognizing how we can better serve. Elena's choices are small but deliberate, a way of aligning her life with something greater. At the food pantry on Saturday, Elena finds herself in a new world. The warehouse hums with volunteers sorting cans, packing bags, and chatting over the clatter of boxes. She's assigned to distribute food, handing out bags to a line of people families, elderly men, young mothers. Some smile, others avoid her eyes, and each face tells a story she'll never fully know. One man, weathered and quiet, thanks her in a low voice. "This means a lot," he says, clutching the bag. Elena feels a lump in her throat, not because she's solved his problems, but because she's part of something that matters. This experience shifts her perspective. She thinks of Christ washing the disciples' feet, a humble act that Pope Francis often cites as the heart of service. In a 2016 homily, he said, "We are called to bend down to touch the wounds of others, to share their burdens." For Elena, the pantry is a place to bend down to see the dignity in each person. She starts to notice the volunteers, too. A retiree who's been there for years, a teenager who jokes to keep things light. They're ordinary people like her choosing to show up. This is the 8th step: serve where you stand. You don't need to change the world. You need only to act with love in the place where you are. The pantry also challenges Elena's assumptions. She's always thought of charity as a one-way street, giving to those in need. But as she talks with the people she serves, she realizes they're giving her something to perspective: gratitude, a reminder of shared humanity. One woman, a single mother named Clara, shares a story about losing her job, but finding hope through a church program. "It's not easy," Clara says, "but I keep going because I know I'm not alone." Elena nods, thinking of her own struggles. She sees Christ's teaching in Matthew's Gospel. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me." Pope Francis expands on this in Fratelli Tutti, calling for a culture of encounter where giving and receiving blur into mutual respect. This encounter with Clara lingers as Elena returns to her routine. She starts to see opportunities for connection everywhere: at work with her mother, even in fleeting moments with strangers. On Monday, she brings coffee for Sam, her colleague, as a small thank you for his support. He's surprised, and they end up talking about more than work: his dreams of starting a family, her love of sketching. These moments feel like gifts, small but significant. This is the 9th step: build bridges through kindness. It's about recognizing that every interaction is a chance to reflect Christ's love, as Pope Francis urges, "Let us go out to meet others, to bring them the joy of the gospel." Yet, not every bridge is easy to build. Elena's relationship with her mother, Sophia, is a source of both love and tension. Sophia's arthritis limits her mobility, and she's grown more dependent, which frustrates her proud spirit. Elena visits often, but their conversations sometimes spiral into complaints about doctors, about the past, about Maria's absence. Elena feels caught between duty and resentment, wondering how to love without losing herself. She thinks of Christ's command in John's Gospel: "Love one another as I have loved you." Pope Francis, in Amoris Laetitia, writes, "Love is patient. Love is kind. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things." Patience. Elena realizes is not passive but active, a choice to stay present even when it's hard. One evening, instead of rushing through her visit, Elena tries something new. She brings a sketchbook and asks Sophia to tell her about her childhood in a small coastal town. As Sophia talks about fishing boats, her mother's bread, the festivals, Elena sketches the scenes, capturing the joy in her mother's eyes. For the first time in months, they're not caregiver and patient, but mother and daughter sharing a story. Sophia keeps the sketches, taping them to her fridge, and Elena feels a warmth that lingers long after she leaves. This is the 10th step, love through patience. It's about meeting people where they are not where you want them to be, and trusting that love will carve a path. These steps: intention, discernment, service, kindness, patience, are weaving a new pattern in Elena's life. She's still tired, still stretched, but she's learning to see her struggles as invitations. Her work, once a source of stress, becomes a canvas for creativity. Her time at the pantry, once a duty, becomes a place of encounter. Her relationship with Sophia, once strained, becomes a space for healing. Even her connection with Maria grows stronger. They text more often, planning another visit. Each choice is a thread tying her to others, to God, to herself. But the world doesn't pause for Elena's growth. A week later, a news story shakes her. A local shooting blocks from her apartment leaves the community reeling. She scrolls through posts on X where voices clash, some mourning, others blaming, few listening. The fear and anger are palpable, and Elena feels it too. She wants to do something, but what? She thinks of Christ's call in Matthew's Gospel, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Pope Francis, in a 2020 address, says, "Mourning is not weakness. It is a sign of a heart that loves." To mourn, Elena realizes, is to stand with those who suffer, to refuse indifference. She joins a community vigil for the victims held in a park near the shooting. The crowd is diverse: families, activists, clergy, neighbors. Candles flicker, and a priest reads the names of the fallen. Elena doesn't speak, but she listens, holding space for the grief. Afterward, she talks with a woman named Aisha, who lost a cousin in the violence. Aisha's pain is raw, but so is her resolve to advocate for change. "We can't stop," she says. "We have to keep showing up." Elena nods, feeling a call to do the same. This is the 11th step, mourn with others. It's about sharing in the world's pain, not as a bystander, but as a neighbor, trusting that presence is a form of hope. The vigil stays with Elena, shaping her days. She starts reading about local efforts to address violence, youth programs, community dialogues, policy changes. She doesn't have all the answers, but she donates to a youth center and signs up for a workshop on conflict resolution. These are small steps, but they feel like seeds. She thinks of Christ's parable of the mustard seed, which Pope Francis describes in Evangelii Gaudium as a symbol of faith's quiet power. It starts small, but it grows into something great. This is the 12th step, plant seeds of change. It's about acting, however modestly, to build a world that reflects God's kingdom. As Elena's journey continues, she's learning that faith is not a shield from pain, but a lens to see it clearly. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis are her guide, showing her how to live with intention, discernment, service, kindness, patience, and solidarity. Her life is still a work in progress. There are late nights, hard conversations, moments of doubt, but she's not alone. She carries the stories of Sam, Clara, Sophia, Aisha, and countless others, each a reminder that we are bound by love. And so we leave Elena for now, standing in her studio sketching a new design. It's inspired by the vigil, a tree, its branches reaching wide, its roots deep. She thinks of Pope Francis's words in Laudato Si. Everything is connected. Her faith, her work, her relationships, her world. They are all part of one story, one call to live boldly and humbly. The sketch is not finished, just as her journey is not complete. But it's enough for today, a testament to a life rooted in love, reaching for grace. Elena's sketch of the tree lies unfinished on her desk, its branches curling like a promise yet to be fulfilled. Outside her window, the city hums with its relentless rhythm. Sirens, footsteps, the distant pulse of construction. It's been a week since the vigil, and the weight of that night lingers not as despair, but as a quiet call to keep going. Elena feels it in her bones. The world's brokenness is not a reason to withdraw, but a reason to engage. Her faith, once a private refuge, is becoming a public act, a way of weaving her small life into the larger tapestry of God's work. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis, like the roots of her sketched tree, anchor her as she navigates new challenges, doubt, division, and the courage to stand for what is just. The morning begins with a challenge at work. Elena's agency is pitching for a major client, a retail chain known for cutting corners on labor practices. Her team is tasked with creating a campaign that polishes the company's image, and Elena's designs are central to the pitch. But as she reviews the brief, her stomach twists. She's seen posts on X about the chain's low wages and unsafe conditions, and the vigil's call to solidarity still burns in her mind. She thinks of Christ's words in Matthew's Gospel. You cannot serve both God and money. Pope Francis in Laudato Si warns against a culture of indifference that prioritizes profit over people. For Elena, this is not just a job. It's a moral crossroads. She spends the morning wrestling with her role. Quitting isn't an option. She needs the income and she loves her work. But neither can she stay silent. She thinks of Pope Francis's call in Evangelii Gaudium to say no to an economy of exclusion where the poor are discarded. Elena decides to act not with grand gestures, but with integrity. She schedules a meeting with her supervisor, Lisa, and prepares to voice her concerns. This is the 13th step, speak truth with courage. It's about naming what's wrong, not to condemn, but to invite change, trusting that honesty is a seed of justice. The meeting is tense. Elena's hands tremble as she explains her discomfort with the client's practices. I want our work to mean something, she says, not just cover up harm. Lisa listens, her expression unreadable. This is a big account, she says finally. But I hear you. Let's talk with the team. The response isn't a victory, but it's a start. Elena feels exposed, vulnerable, but also free. She's chosen fidelity to her values over safety, echoing Christ's call to let your light shine before others. Pope Francis, in a 2017 homily, says, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the strength to act despite it." For Elena, this courage is a quiet revolution, reshaping her work from within. The conversation ripples through the team. Sam, her colleague, pulls her aside later. I didn't know you felt that way, he says. I've been uneasy too. They brainstorm ways to approach the campaign differently, highlighting the client's potential for positive change, like fair wages, rather than glossing over flaws. It's a risk, but Elena feels a spark of hope. This is the 14th step, collaborate for the common good. Christ's ministry was communal, gathering disciples to share the load. Pope Francis, in Fratelli Tutti, calls for social friendship where people work together across differences. Elena and Sam's partnership, small as it is a step toward that vision. Outside work, Elena's commitment to the food pantry deepens. She's now a regular, not just distributing food, but helping organize donations. The pantry's director, Father Michael, a wiry priest with a quick laugh, notices her dedication. One afternoon, as they sort canned goods, he asks if she'd consider joining a community outreach team. "We're trying to connect people, volunteers, families, local businesses," he says. "You've got a gift for seeing people." Elena hesitates. Her plate is full, and she's still learning to balance her responsibilities. But she thinks of Christ's parable of the talents, where faithfulness means using what you're given. Pope Francis, in Gaudete et Exsultate, writes, "We are all called to be missionaries, to bring Christ's love to the world." This is the 15th step, say yes to your call. It's about recognizing that your gifts, however ordinary, are meant to serve. Elena joins the outreach team, and her first task is daunting visiting local businesses to seek donations. She's no salesperson, and the thought of asking for help makes her cringe. But she prepares researching each store and tailoring her pitch to their values. At a family-owned bakery, she meets the owner, Mr. Rossi, a gruff man with flour-dusted hands. "Why should I give?" he asks, eyeing her skeptically. Elena takes a breath, remembering Pope Francis's advice in Amoris Laetitia to speak with sincerity and listen with openness. She shares a story about Clara, the single mother from the pantry, and how the food helps her family thrive. "Your bread could be part of that," she says. Mr. Rossi softens, promising a weekly donation. Elena leaves with more than bread, she leaves with a lesson. This is the 16th step. Share stories that connect. Christ taught in parables, and Pope Francis calls stories a bridge to the heart. For Elena, storytelling becomes a way to build trust, to make the abstract real. These steps encourage collaboration. Calling storytelling are reshaping Elena's world, but they don't erase her doubts. At home, she faces a new struggle, her own inner noise. The vigil, the pantry, the work conflict they've stirred, questions about her purpose, her faith, her place in a world that feels so divided. She sits with her sketchbook staring at the tree and wonders if she's doing enough, if she's enough. She thinks of Christ's temptation in the desert, where he faced doubt and chose trust. Pope Francis, in a 2021 address, says doubt is not the enemy of faith. It is part of the journey. The key is to bring it to God. This is the 17th step. Embrace doubt as a path to trust. Elena starts journaling her questions. Why is there so much suffering? Am I making a difference? And offers them in prayer, not expecting answers, but seeking peace. Her doubts find a new context when she attends the conflict resolution workshop she signed up for after the vigil. The room is a mix of strangers, teachers, activists, retirees, each with their own reasons for being there. The facilitator, a woman named Dr. Lynn, introduces the session with a quote from "Christ, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." She ties it to Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti, where he calls for artisans of peace who build bridges in a fractured world. The workshop teaches practical skills, active listening, de-escalation, finding common ground. But what strikes Elena is the emphasis on inner peace. You can't give what you don't have. Dr. Lynn says, peacemaking starts with your own heart. Elena practices these skills in small ways. At the pantry, when two volunteers argue over scheduling, she listens to both sides and suggests a compromise. At home, when Sophia snaps about a delayed prescription, Elena breathes deeply and responds with calm, not defensiveness. These moments are not dramatic, but they're transformative. This is the 18th step practice, peace in the ordinary. Christ's peace, as Pope Francis writes in Gaudete et Exsultate, is not a superficial calm, but a deep trust that radiates outward. For Elena, peace is a muscle strengthened through daily choices. The workshop also introduces Elena to Aisha, the woman she met at the vigil. They reconnect over coffee, and Aisha shares more about her cousin's death and her work with a youth program to prevent violence. It's slow, Aisha says, but every kid we reach is a win. Elena admires her resilience, but Aisha admits her own struggles, anger, grief, the fear that nothing will change. Sometimes I just want to scream, she says. Elena listens, not fixing but holding space as she did at the vigil. She thinks of Christ's words, "Come to me, all you who are weary." Pope Francis, in a 2019 homily, calls this the ministry of accompaniment, walking with others in their pain. This is the 19th step: accompany others in their struggles. It's about being present not as a savior, but as a companion, trusting that God works through shared journeys. Aisha's story inspires Elena to deepen her own commitment. She volunteers at the youth center. Aisha mentioned helping with an art program. The kids, mostly teens from tough backgrounds, are skeptical at first, but Elena's sketches win them over. She teaches them to draw trees like the one on her desk and asks them to imagine what their branches could hold: dreams, hopes, futures. One boy, Jamal, draws a tree with roots in the ground and branches reaching the stars. "I want to be an astronaut," he says, shy but proud. Elena feels a lump in her throat, seeing Christ's promise in John's Gospel. "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Pope Francis, in Christus Vivit, writes, "Young people are not the future. They are the now of God." This is the 20th step: nurture the dreams of others. It's about helping people, especially the young, see their worth and potential. As Elena's days unfold, her life feels less like a checklist and more like a story. Her work, once a battleground, is now a place to practice courage and collaboration. The pantry, once a duty, is a community of encounter. Her doubts, once a burden, are a path to deeper trust. Her relationships with Sophia, Maria, Aisha, Jamal are not perfect, but growing, rooted in patience and presence. Even the city with its noise and pain feels like a canvas for grace. She thinks of Pope Francis's words in Laudato Si: all is not lost. Human beings capable of the worst are also capable of rising above themselves, choosing again what is good. One evening, Elena returns to her sketchbook. The tree is still there, its branches unfinished. She picks up a pencil and begins to draw, adding leaves, each one a name: Sam, Clara, Sophia, Aisha, Jamal. The tree is not just hers, it's theirs, a symbol of connection, growth, hope. She thinks of Christ's parable of the vine and branches. "I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me bears much fruit." Pope Francis, in a 2020 homily, says, "We are not isolated. We are connected, called to bear fruit together." Elena's fruit is not perfection, but presence, not solutions, but solidarity. As we leave Elena for now, she's standing in her studio, the city's lights glittering outside. Her phone buzzes a text from Maria planning a family dinner, an email from Father Michael thanking her for the bakery donation. The demands are still there, but so is the grace. Elena's faith, shaped by Christ's teachings, and Pope Francis's wisdom, is a living thing growing through courage, peace, accompaniment, and love. Her tree, like her life, is unfinished, but thriving, its roots deep, its branches reaching toward a world made new by humble service and bold faith. Elena stands in her studio, the pencil still warm in her hand. The tree sketch, now a constellation of names etched into its leaves. The city's heartbeat pulses beyond her window. Car horns, laughter, the faint wail of a siren. But inside, there's a stillness, a sacred pause. Her life, once a tangle of stress and disconnection, is beginning to feel like a garden tended by the small, deliberate acts of faith she's sown. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis have become her soil, nourishing her through the ordinary and the extraordinary. Yet the world does not stand still, and new seasons bring new challenges. As Elena steps into this next chapter, she faces the pull of complacency, the sting of betrayal, and the call to forgive all, while learning that faith is not a finish line, but a lifelong dance of trust and transformation. The week begins with the quiet triumph. The outreach team at the food pantry, with Elena's help, secures donations from 3 more businesses: a coffee shop, a grocery, and a hardware store. Father Michael gathers the team to celebrate, passing around donuts and coffee in the pantry's cluttered office. "This is what the kingdom looks like," he says, quoting Pope Francis from Evangelii Gaudium. "A community that shares, that builds together, that refuses to leave anyone behind." Elena feels a glow of pride, not for herself, but for the web of connection she's part of. She thinks of Christ's words in John's Gospel. "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." This is the 21st step. Celebrate shared victories. It's about pausing to honor the collective work of love, recognizing that every step forward is a glimpse of God's dream for the world. But the glow fades by midweek when Elena faces a setback at work. The pitch for the retail client, which she and Sam reshaped to emphasize ethical practices, is rejected. Lisa, her supervisor, calls a team meeting to deliver the news. They went with another agency. She says her tone clipped. "They said our approach was too idealistic." The room is silent, but Elena feels the weight of unspoken blame. Later, a colleague, Jenna, corners her in the break room. "Your push for all that ethical stuff tanked us," Jenna says, her voice sharp. "Some of us need this job, Elena." The words sting not just for their accusation, but for the betrayal. Elena thought the team was aligned, but now she feels exposed alone. She retreats to her apartment that evening, the tree sketch mocking her from the desk. Doubt creeps in. Did I push too hard? Am I naive? She thinks of Christ's betrayal by Judas, the pain of a friend's rejection. Pope Francis, in a 2018 homily, reflects on this. Betrayal hurts because it breaks trust, but it also invites us to forgive, to love, even when it costs us. Forgiveness feels impossible tonight, but Elena knows it's not about erasing the hurt. It's about refusing to let it define her. She journals her anger, her shame, then whispers a prayer. "Help me, let this go." This is the 22nd step. Name the hurt to heal it. It's about facing betrayal head on, not to dwell in it, but to offer it to God, trusting that healing comes through honesty. The next day, Elena takes a small but brave step. At work, she approaches Jenna not to confront, but to understand. "I didn't mean to hurt the team," she says softly. "Can we talk about what happened?" Jenna is defensive at first, but as Elena listens, she softens, admitting her own fear of losing her job. "I shouldn't have snapped," Jenna says. "It's just a lot." The conversation doesn't erase the tension, but it cracks open a door. Elena thinks of Christ's command in Matthew's Gospel. "If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you." Pope Francis in Amoris. Letitia calls this fraternal correction a love that seeks restoration, not revenge. This is the 23rd step: seek reconciliation with humility. It's about approaching conflict with a heart open to healing, even when the outcome is uncertain. This experience shifts Elena's perspective on her work. She realizes that courage like the kind she showed in the pitch comes with risk and sometimes failure. But failure is not the end. She thinks of Pope Francis's words in Gaudete et Exsultate. God is not afraid of our falls. He is there to lift us up. Elena decides to keep advocating for ethical design, but more strategically. She proposes a new project to Lisa, a pro bono campaign for a local nonprofit that supports fair labor. Lisa, impressed by Elena's persistence, agrees to consider it. This is the 24th step: learn from failure. It's about seeing setbacks as teachers, not verdicts, and using them to grow in wisdom and resolve. Beyond work, Elena's commitment to the youth center deepens. Her art classes with the teens are now a highlight of her week. Jamal, the boy who dreamed of being an astronaut, shows her a new drawing, a rocket soaring past his tree. "You think I can really do it?" he asks, his eyes searching hers. Elena feels the weight of his question, knowing the odds he faces: poverty, a fractured school system, a world that often dismisses dreams like his. She thinks of Christ's words, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them." Pope Francis in Christus Vivit urges adults to accompany young people without stifling their hope. Elena kneels beside Jamal. "I think you can do anything you set your heart to," she says. "And I'll help you find the way." This is the 25th step: champion the vulnerable. It's about standing with those society overlooks, offering not just words, but action to lift them up. Elena's promise to Jamal leads her to research STEM programs for teens, connecting with a local organization that offers scholarships. She helps Jamal apply, spending evenings tutoring him in math to prepare. The process is slow, and Jamal's confidence wavers, but Elena stays steady, echoing Pope Francis's call in Fratelli Tutti to walk with others in their struggles with patience and hope. Her work with Jamal also challenges her own assumptions. She's always seen herself as someone who helps, but Jamal's resilience, his humor, his grit, teaches her that the vulnerable are not just recipients of aid, but bearers of strength. This is the 26th step: learn from those you serve. Christ dined with sinners and learned from their stories. Elena, too, is shaped by Jamal's courage. At home, Elena's relationship with Sophia evolves. The sketches from their storytelling night have become a ritual. Each visit, Sophia shares a memory, and Elena draws it. One evening, Sophia recounts her wedding day, her voice soft with nostalgia. "I was so scared," she admits. "But your father, he made me believe we could face anything." Elena, sketching the lace of Sophia's dress, feels a pang. She's always seen her mother as strong, unyielding, but now she sees her vulnerability. It deepens her love, but it also stirs fear. Sophia's health is declining, and the future feels uncertain. Elena thinks of Christ's assurance in John's Gospel. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Pope Francis, in a 2020 homily, says, "Faith does not remove fear. It gives us the courage to walk through it." This is the 27th step: embrace vulnerability with trust. It's about loving through uncertainty, knowing that God holds what we cannot. This trust is tested when Sophia's arthritis worsens, landing her in the hospital for a week. Elena and Maria take turns at her bedside coordinating care and navigating insurance. The stress rekindles old tensions. Maria feels Elena's too controlling. Elena feels Maria's too distant. One night, exhausted, they argue in the hospital cafeteria. "You're not here enough," Elena snaps. Maria fires back. "You don't get to decide what's enough." The words hang heavy, and Elena feels the rift widening. But she remembers the reconciliation with Jenna, the power of humility. She thinks of Christ's call to forgive 70 times 7. Pope Francis, in Amoris Laetitia, writes, "Forgiveness is not a one-time act, but a journey of mercy." Elena takes a breath and says, "I'm sorry. I'm scared, and I took it out on you." Maria softens, and they hug, tears mixing with relief. This is the 28th step: forgive as a journey. It's about choosing mercy again and again, trusting that love outlasts pain. The hospital stay also brings Elena closer to her mother's faith. Sophia, despite her pain, prays the rosary daily, her fingers tracing the beads. One afternoon, she asks Elena to pray with her. Elena, whose faith has been more practical than devotional, feels awkward, but agrees. As they pray, she feels a quiet connection, not just to Sophia, but to something larger. Pope Francis, in Gaudete et Exsultate, calls prayer the heartbeat of faith, a way to root ourselves in God's presence. This is the 29th step: pray to stay rooted. For Elena, prayer becomes a bridge linking her to Sophia, to God, to the strength she needs. When Sophia returns home, Elena and Maria adjust their lives to support her. Elena cuts back on work hours, leaning on Sam and Jenna to cover projects. Maria moves closer, renting an apartment nearby. The sisters are not perfect. They bicker. They stumble, but they're committed. Elena thinks of Christ's parable of the house built on rock, standing firm through storms. Pope Francis, in Fratelli Tutti, writes, "Family is the first place we learn to love, to forgive, to build." This is the 30th step: build on the rock of family. It's about nurturing the bonds that ground us, even when they're messy, knowing they're a foundation for faith. As Elena's world shifts, so does her city. The shooting that sparked the vigil has ignited broader conversations about safety and justice. Elena attends a community forum where Aisha speaks about her youth program. The room is tense. Some demand harsher laws, others call for systemic change. Elena feels the divide, the anger, but she also sees possibility. She thinks of Christ's call to be salt and light, seasoning the world with hope. Pope Francis, in Evangelii Gaudium, urges us to go to the peripheries, engaging with society's wounds. Elena volunteers to help Aisha's program expand, designing flyers and a website. This is the 31st step: engage the world's wounds. It's about stepping into broken places with faith, not to fix everything, but to offer light. Elena's engagement deepens when she joins a citywide coalition for violence prevention. The work is slow meetings, grants, debates, but it's real. She meets people like her, ordinary yet determined, and feels part of something larger. Pope Francis, in Laudato Si', writes, "We are all connected, part of one human family." Elena sees this in the coalition in the pantry in her family. Her tree sketch, now framed on her wall, is a reminder every leaf, every name is part of the whole. This is the 32nd step live as one family. It's about acting as if every person matters, because in God's eyes, they do. As we leave Elena, she's at the youth center watching Jamal present his rocket drawing to the group. His smile is a star bright against the odds. Elena's life is not easy. Sophia's health work pressures the city's pain remain, but it's full. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis are her compass, guiding her through betrayal, fear, and forgiveness to a faith that's alive, communal, enduring. Her tree, like her story, keeps growing, its branches heavy with love, its roots deep in grace, reaching for a world where every heart finds home. Elena watches Jamal's rocket drawing catch the light, his proud grin a beacon in the youth center's crowded room. The other teens clap their voices a chorus of encouragement, and for a moment, the weight of the world, its violence, its inequities, feels lighter. Elena's journey, woven through months of struggle and grace, has brought her here to a place where small acts of faith bear fruit. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis have been her guide, not as distant ideals, but as living truths shaping her response to stress, disconnection, conflict, and now the call to hope. As she steps into this final chapter, Elena faces the challenge of sustaining her commitment, the temptation of despair, and the invitation to live with joy, discovering that faith is not a solitary endeavor, but a shared song sung through service, sacrifice, and celebration. The youth center is buzzing as the art class wraps up. Elena gathers her supplies, chatting with the teens about their dreams: astronaut, chef, engineer. Each aspiration feels like a seed, fragile but fierce. Outside, the city presses on its scars visible in the boarded-up shops and the news of another shooting on X. Elena feels the tension, the joy of this moment against the backdrop of a world that seems to resist healing. She thinks of Christ's words in John's Gospel. "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Pope Francis, in Gaudete et Exsultate, calls this the joy of the gospel, a hope that persists through pain. For Elena, this is the 33rd step: choose joy as an act of faith. It's about holding on to hope not as denial of suffering, but as defiance against despair. Back at her apartment, Elena faces the practical challenge of sustaining her commitments. The youth center, the food pantry, her mother's care, her job. They all demand time and energy, and she's only one person. She sits with her tree sketch now framed and crowded with names, and feels a flicker of overwhelm. She recalls Pope Francis's advice in Christus Vivit. Do not try to do everything alone. Ask for help. Build community trust that God works through others. Elena decides to lean on her network. She calls Father Michael to discuss delegating some pantry tasks and texts Maria about sharing Sophia's care more evenly. This is the 34th step: share the load. Christ called disciples to work together. Elena too must trust that her efforts are part of a larger whole. The next day, Elena meets Father Michael at the pantry. He's sorting donations, his sleeves rolled up, humming a hymn. "You're doing a lot," he says, "but you don't have to carry it all." They brainstorm ways to streamline the outreach team, recruiting new volunteers and assigning roles based on strengths. Elena feels a weight lift, not because her tasks are gone, but because she's not alone. She thinks of Christ's promise. "For where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them." Pope Francis in Fratelli. Tutti calls community the miracle of togetherness. This is the 35th step: build community as a witness. It's about creating spaces where people share burdens and dreams reflecting God's presence. At work, Elena's pro bono project for the Fair Labor nonprofit is gaining traction. Lisa approves it, and Elena collaborates with Sam and Jenna to design a campaign that highlights workers' stories. The process is healing after the earlier conflict. Jenna, once resentful, now contributes ideas with enthusiasm. Elena sees Christ's parable of the sower, where seeds fall on different soils, some yielding fruit despite rocky ground. Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium writes, "Perseverance turns small efforts into great harvests." This is the 36th step: persevere through setbacks. Elena's workplace, once a source of stress, is becoming a place of purpose, proof that faith can transform even the ordinary. But perseverance is tested when Elena faces a personal crisis. Sophia's health takes a sharp turn. A fall at home leads to a broken hip requiring surgery and a long recovery. Elena and Maria are at the hospital daily, juggling fear and logistics. Sophia, usually stoic, is frail and frustrated, snapping at nurses and withdrawing into silence. Elena feels helpless, her faith shaken by the sight of her mother's pain. She thinks of Christ on the cross, crying, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Pope Francis, in a 2020 homily, says, "The cross is not the end. It is the place where love meets suffering." Elena sits by Sophia's bed, holding her hand, and prays silently, not for miracles, but for strength. This is the 37th step: meet suffering with love. It's about staying present in pain, trusting that love is stronger than loss. Sophia's surgery is successful, but the recovery is grueling. Elena and Maria take turns staying with her, adapting her apartment for mobility. The sisters' old tensions resurface. Maria feels Elena's too rigid. Elena feels Maria's too lax, but they've learned to navigate conflict with grace. One night, exhausted, they share a pizza and laugh about Sophia's stubbornness, a moment of lightness amid the strain. Elena thinks of Christ's command, "Love one another as I have loved you." Pope Francis in Amoris. Letitia calls family a school of love where we learn to bear each other's flaws. This is the 38th step: grow through family's messiness. Elena and Maria's bond, imperfect but resilient, is a testament to love's endurance. As Sophia heals, Elena returns to the youth center where Jamal's scholarship application is progressing. He's been accepted into a STEM camp, a step toward his astronaut dream. Elena organizes a small celebration, inviting Aisha and the other teens to share cupcakes and stories. Jamal beams, showing off a model rocket he built. Elena feels Christ's words, "Let your light shine." Pope Francis, in Christus Vivit, urges us to accompany young people in their greatness. This is the 39th step: celebrate others' light. It's about rejoicing in others' growth, knowing that every victory is a shared gift. The city, too, is shifting. The Violence Prevention Coalition Elena joined is making progress. New funding for youth programs, community dialogues, gaining traction. Aisha invites Elena to speak at a forum about the art program's impact. Nervous but determined, Elena shares Jamal's story showing his tree and rocket drawings. The audience, diverse and engaged, responds with applause. Elena thinks of Christ's call to be a city on a hill. Pope Francis in Laudato Si writes, "Small actions done with love can change the world." This is the 40th step, amplify hope through action. Elena's voice, once hesitant, is now a beacon inviting others to join the work. Yet hope is not immunity to despair. One evening, scrolling through X, Elena sees posts about global crises, climate disasters, wars, injustice. The scale overwhelms her, making her efforts feel like drops in an ocean. She sits with her tree sketch, questioning its meaning. She recalls Pope Francis's words in Laudato Si. "We may not solve every problem, but we must not give up." Christ's parable of the yeast comes to mind, small, hidden, yet transforming the whole dough. This is the 41st step. Trust the power of smallness. Elena's actions, her sketches, her service, her presence, are yeast working quietly to leaven the world. This trust leads Elena to a new practice: gratitude. Each night she lists 3 things she's thankful for. Sophia's smile, Jamal's courage, a kind word from Sam. The habit shifts her focus from what's lacking to what's abundant. She thinks of Christ's feeding of the 5,000, where a few loaves became enough. Pope Francis, in a 2021 homily, calls gratitude the memory of the heart. This is the 42nd step: cultivate gratitude. It's about seeing God's gifts in the ordinary, fueling hope for the journey. Elena's gratitude deepens her prayer life. She starts attending a weekly prayer group at Father Michael's church, a mix of pantry volunteers and neighbors. They share stories, pray for the city, and sing hymns that linger in Elena's heart. One night they reflect on Christ's words, "I am with you always to the end of the age." Pope Francis, in Gaudete et Exsultate, calls prayer a return to the heart of faith. This is the 43rd step: find strength in shared prayer. For Elena, the group is a lifeline rooting her in a faith that's communal, alive. As Sophia's recovery progresses, Elena and Maria plan a family dinner to celebrate. They cook Sophia's favorite meal, lasagna and tiramisu, inviting Father Michael, Aisha, and Sam. The apartment is cramped, the table mismatched, but the room hums with warmth. Sophia, still using a walker, raises a glass. To family old and new. Elena looks around her mother, her sister, her friends, and feels Christ's promise. "Whoever does the will of my Father is my brother and sister and mother." Pope Francis, in Fratelli Tutti, calls this the family of humanity. This is the 44th step: create a table for all. Elena's dinner, simple yet profound, is a microcosm of God's kingdom where everyone belongs. The dinner inspires Elena to expand her outreach. She proposes a community meal at the pantry, inviting volunteers, families, and local businesses. Mr. Rossi, the baker, donates bread. The coffee shop provides drinks. The event, held in a park, draws a crowd. Clara, the single mother, brings her kids. Jamal shows off his rocket. Music plays, stories flow, and for a few hours the city feels whole. Elena thinks of Christ's banquet parables where all are welcome. Pope Francis, in Evangelii Gaudium, writes, "The Church is a house with open doors. This is the 45th step, open the doors wide." Elena's meal is a sign of inclusion, a call to build a world where no one is left out. As the year turns, Elena reflects on her journey. Her tree sketch, now a tapestry of names, hangs above her desk, a reminder of connection. Her life is not perfect. Sophia's health is fragile, the city's wounds persist, her own doubts linger, but it's full. She thinks of Christ's words, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Pope Francis, in Laudato Si, writes, "Everything is connected, and we are called to live in harmony." This is the 46th step, live in harmony. Elena's faith, shaped by service, forgiveness, hope, and community, is a song of harmony, sung through every choice. We leave Elena at the pantry packing bags for the next distribution. A new volunteer, a shy teenager, asks her why she keeps showing up. Elena smiles, thinking of her tree, her family, her city. "Because we're all connected," she says, "and this is how we grow." The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis have carried her here through noise and silence, pain and joy, to a faith that's humble, bold, and alive. Her story, like her tree, is not finished, but it's thriving, its roots deep in love, its branches reaching for a world made new by grace, where every heart sings together in the eternal chorus of God's hope.